I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello everyone, welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today I'm joined by Mr. Bryan Wetzel. He is a Georgian. As a Georgian, he has had a diverse career across industries. He started his career at Nashika's R&D lab and then founded a production company that contributed to the 1996 Olympics and a landmark murder trial. He launched businesses like Scrubs, which is a top education startup, and now he owns the local gym in Cedar Crest Grill in Dallas, Georgia. His production work spans commercials, TV pilots, and live broadcasts, earning him 16 awards. Bryan's latest venture is writing, with books on education and faith through science released in 2024. He is a versatile entrepreneur, content creator, and thought leader. His journey from production to restaurateur, as well as education entrepreneur, gym owner, and author, demonstrates his adaptability and innovation. So, Bryan, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Can't wait to hear what
Thanks
you
for
have
having
to.
me.
So, if you could just kind of introduce yourself and share with my audience a little bit more about what you do.
Well, I grew up in Lawrenceville, Georgia. I'm in my latter half of my 50s, so I've seen a lot and done a lot in my life. And while many people probably take a job and stay with that kind of job for a long time, I was always very restless. And so my first work was in an R&D lab. I love that job actually. But the company was kind of nuts. And after 3 years, I left and went out on my own and started my own production company and studio. And that led me to travel around the country doing various contract work from documentaries to, just getting things done for small films or TV shows. And then eventually I had my own TV shows. But along the way, I still wanted to be an entrepreneur. I grew up for some reason. It's funny because my dad was a CPA and he was very conservative, particularly with money. So he never opened a business because that was too risky. But even as a kid, when I was 13, I mowed grass. I carried a ladder around the neighborhood to clean out gutters for anyone who would pay me. And I just had a aching. I like being creative. And I don't think people think of starting small businesses as being creative, but it is in the sense that I never started a franchise where everything was done for me. I wanted to create the logo and the look and the feel. And so through the years, I've owned several smaller businesses. The restaurant that I did own, we sold recently, and I sold one of my gyms. And so I'm down to one gym, and I'm just being a consultant right now, and I'm writing my third book. So I'm just someone who's very restless. I don't sit still very much. I have to be doing something, or I get bored very easily.
So, as your role as an entrepreneur, what have been some common mistakes small business owners make that really hurt their success?
Well, there's really 10 to 12 of them. I'll go through a few of them. The first one is, and whenever I do a speech before small business owners or entrepreneurs or people who want to be an entrepreneur, and this is important for everyone listening. The first thing I ask is, have you created a business plan? If they say no, then I say you shouldn't even be here trying to start a business. The first thing you got to do is to do a business plan. So you've got to write it down on paper so that you can work out all the details. You can work out all of the possible problems. You can come up with a good business plan will have the financials in it. So you can put in what you're charging, you can put in your expenses to run the business, and then you can see how many customers you have to arrive at in order to break even. It's a roadmap to success. If you can't see it work out on paper, then that might not be a business that you want to open up or go into until you can solve some of those problems. Running a small business is hard and it's expensive. You would not want to go into it without having a good plan in place. And I can promise you, I've had people who ask me for help, and I say, look, before I come and help you, I want you to do a plan. There's an online site, there's a bunch, but there's an online site called liveplan.com. They're not a sponsor, they're not paying me for anything. It's just the one that I use because I love it. It walks you through everything. It tells you what stuff you need to fill in, what you need to write. It does the financials for you. You just got to put in all the correct information. I've had people come to me who already had a business, and I tell them to do a plan, and they'll say, you know what, I realized some things that we weren't doing correctly or we weren't accounting for. And I say, yeah, exactly. That's the reason you do the plan, is so that you understand exactly what it's going to take to make money in your business. Otherwise, there's no point in working that hard. The second thing is, and I have made this mistake many times. You think I would have learned by now, but if you're going to get into a partnership, like I was younger, I wanted to open a business with my best friend. Sounds good. We got along great. But that doesn't necessarily mean when it comes down to, because, money will ruin friendships. Um, is your friend have the same work ethic as you? Are you going to be working twice as much, but he's taking 50%? One of the things that people don't realize, this is probably the biggest misconception. A lot of people think that, well, if it doesn't work out, I can just kick him out of the business. Or, I can do, there's probably ways I can go to court and get him out of the business because he's not contributing. He or she's not contributing. But that's not the case. Once you have that document that says the two of you own this business, that person's with you. The only way to get them out is for them to agree to leave or for you to buy them out. If the company is profitable and they're not doing any work, they have very little incentive. I know someone right now, this has been going on for 12 years. His partner decided he didn't want to do anything, and he didn't think the business was going to be successful after they worked at it for 2 years. The business is now making $2 million a year. I don't know what the profit is, but it's pretty good. His partner's taking 50% every year, and he's not putting in an hour of effort. And why would he leave? Because he's getting free money while the other people are doing all the work. Be very careful with partnerships you get into, because we really don't know. Uh, Even if it's a family member, you don't always know if they're going to put in the same effort, if they're going to stay in it for the long haul. And it'll ruin that relationship, I promise you, if it goes sour. Um, Another one is, and this one is, so a lot of people I meet for some reason want to do payroll themselves. That's ridiculous. Payroll is like taxes. It's extremely uh, hard to understand all the rules and all of the little caveats you need to know, and you don't get to take this deduction when it's this, or this person has to pay a little extra taxes because of their rate. Like it's complicated and it gets more complicated all the time. There are cheap sites now, like Gusto. Also, they don't pay me anything, but that's a very inexpensive site. You put it in, it does all the work for you, sends the money to the IRS, tells you what you owe. Why would you try and do all this yourself? Doing payroll for, say, employees, you're going to spend several hours a month. Let someone else do it. Just plug in their hours or what they're supposed to get paid, onboard new people, take people out who quit, let them do all the work for you. And this is the thing, most of those, whether it's Intuit or Gusto or any of the others, they take the insurance responsibility. So if they screw it up, they will pay it for you, the damages, because they guaranteed you that they would do it correct. Um, Another one is, and this one is tricky. This is one of the ones I tell people, this is the best worked out through your business plan. But a lot of people will, the value they put on their service or their product, you need to really think about it. So there's a couple things. I had a sandwich shop. I didn't even charge them. They were local. I love their sandwiches. Um, they were charging very little and they were working so hard to make very little money. I said, why did you charge? How did you choose the prices? Said, well, we were trying to match Subway, which was a couple blocks over. I said that, but that's ridiculous. You don't have the same vendor deals and the same discounts because Subway orders, tens of thousands of buns and tens of thousand pounds of meat. So they get discounts that you are never going to get. And people know that this is a shop where it's made by hand by a local business owner, and they come here because you give them a little bit more and they're willing to pay a little bit more. You should not short yourself just because you're trying to compete with someone you can't compete with. That would be like you and I opening up a convenience store and trying to match Walmart's prices. We don't get the discounts that Walmart gets because of the amount they order. So we
Mm-hmm.
can't, that's not something we should consider. The other half of that problem is I had somebody who was doing basement remodeling a couple of years ago, decided to lower his prices because he saw that he was only getting about 60 or 40% yeses when he would give it an estimate. And let's face it, finishing off a basement is expensive. So some people are going to have to think about it, or they may not have the money. I thought that 40% yeses was good, but he wanted it to be better than 50. So he lowered his price, but I warned him, and then he had to admit it a year later I was right. Is that now you might get more yeses, but you're working twice as much and you're only making as much as you made before because you have cut down your profit margin by lowering the price. And so for everyone, you have to figure out your price point that is comfortable for you. If you're going to work in your own business and have the freedom and you're going to work hard, it should pay off. So the easiest example of that would be trying to sell um, something at such a low price that everybody wants it, and your profit margin is 10%. And you say, well, it's okay that it's 10% because I'm selling a million of them. Okay, but when you charge twice that and you sold 300,000, you're still making about the same amount of money. You're just now working harder because you're making more of the product, but you're not making as much on the product as you were when you charged twice as much. Does that make sense? Um, I've seen people price themselves right out of business. And I promise you that this holds true, and you can ask any small business owner who's been in business for more than 3 years. When a customer comes to you and tries to negotiate, you can negotiate a little bit. It's expected. But when you start really cutting down the price or giving in to their desires to, for this, do we throw this in for free or this? You've now made it a negotiation, and that negotiation will not end until they pay the final payment. That means if you're doing basements all throughout the process, when you think you're almost done, they're going to keep trying to get more. Don't make it a negotiation. Say, this is the price. I will discount it if you go forward today or in the next 48 hours because we have some downtime. I will discount it now, but after that, it goes back to regular price. let them know that this is the price I'm charging. I'm going to give you a chance to get a little bit off of it. But for the most part, this is what we charge for this particular job. It will make when you work hard for a little bit of money, you resent doing the work. Don't resent your business. I'll leave you with this last one. There's more, but this is the most important one. I tell people this all the time. Love your business, but don't fall in love with your business. The principle I'm trying to get at is that when you when you fall in love with something, it's hard for you to let it go. And if your business is not
Mhm.
making any money and you're struggling to make your bills every month and you're taking money out of savings and it's draining you, you can't let it go because you're in love with the business. It's like your child, you created it. I get that. But it's also like a good like an abusive relationship. If you're always giving money to the other person in the relationship and they're not giving anything back to you, well, eventually that gets old and you have to end that relationship. Small businesses are very much the same. And I'm guilty of it as just as much of not realizing when it's time. Maybe I went on an extra year or an extra 6 months too long because I just didn't want to admit that this wasn't going to work. And that's probably the last thing I would say is that I've been successful in business, but I've also had a lot of failures. Your failure doesn't mean that you won't come back from it. Admitting failure doesn't mean that you're done. You may find something else. And quite frankly, two of the businesses that did not do as well as I thought were actually, I thought, my best ideas. But unless there's a market for it, it doesn't really matter how good the idea is. So you have to be willing to step away from it and say, you know what, this isn't going to work, no matter how much I love it.
Yeah, I think those were all grateful tips about starting up a job because it is difficult to build a business from the ground up. Um, and I think there's a lot of hard work and a lot of stress that people don't really understand about it. So, um, I think all the advice you gave was really great advice. I think it's a good one-on-one tip for upcoming businesses and even for businesses that have been around for a long time that are struggling with their business. I think here and that could also help them. Um, I think one thing that I find interesting that you really care about is education, and I really do appreciate that that you kind of have a thing with education. So
Hmm.
share with me a little bit about what your overall opinion about our current education system is.
Well, let me preface it by starting out with my wife is currently a public school teacher. She's going in her 22nd year. Uh, And then I founded a company with another two partners that made educational resources for K through 12 schools around the country. And I traveled around doing speeches, doing conferences, doing trade shows, meeting with district uh, heads, principals. I probably spoke to 2 or 3 thousand teachers in that 6 years. What I saw and continue to see is was really alarming to me. Um, I would say our K through 12 education system is broken, and it's not broken in one place that we can stick it back together. It really needs a complete overhaul. That's not to say that all schools are bad or all districts, but there are, if you, in my book, The Real Problems Destroying Education, I lay out some things that go on in every school district that as a business owner make no sense. One of the things that when I started the company and I would travel around to meet with school districts, I thought that when I got a peek behind the curtain, I would say, "Oh, it all makes sense now. I see why they're making those decisions." Actually, it was just more confusing. Um, there's a lot of things that are done that really have no direct effect on education, but they're done more for optics. They're done more for we're supposed to do this because it's a good thing. But that's not really helping. And there's a lot of like we could go on for this for 2 hours, but I'll give you a few things. So one, when Common Core came out, it was supposed to be And by the way, the idea behind Common Core was great, but you get too many people tinkering with it, too many academics putting their claws in it, and suddenly it gets bastardized into something that didn't work. But the initial idea behind, and this is still a problem, is that when a college, let's say you're applying to University of Wisconsin or you're applying to University of Florida, and you grew up in Alabama or Texas or Georgia or wherever, how do they know what somebody who got a 3.5 in high school in Texas, is that match up? Is that the same education where they got a 3.5 in Florida or a 3.5 in Virginia? There's no coherence. So the curriculum is so different in every state that a 3.5 doesn't translate. So that's why they have the ACT and SATs, but even those are starting, people just take classes now and where they know most of the answers, and so they can't trust that. So Common Core, the idea behind that was to make all of the curriculum across the board in every state exactly the same. That way, a 3.5 meant the same in every state. Your math grade in every state meant the same thing, no matter where you went to school. What what happened was, and there's someone else wrote a book on this. I can't remember their name. They did a brilliant job where they lay out that it goes to all these academics who, some of them in college, for instance, they love math. Okay. And if you love math, I applaud you. I don't. A lot of people don't love math, but they wanted math to be harder. And they wanted, because they said that if you learned how to do the math problems 5 different ways and you honestly, truly understood the math in your head, that the getting the right answer no longer meant anything, that you have to understand why you got the right answer. Okay, I can follow that for a moment. But they made it so hard. So I'm 57. The stuff that, and I have kids who are in their 20s, the stuff my kids learned in 8th grade, they're learning in 3rd grade right now. So they're trying to squeeze a lot in their heads at an earlier age. That started
Mm,
with Common Core. Some of the kids can do it because kids, especially younger ages, they mature at different speeds. But a lot have struggle with it. And it's so bad when Common Core started that even the parents, when they would come home and they didn't understand the math, even some who had a higher degree and had been very successful in their jobs would look at the math and the homework and say, I have no idea what this is asking. That's a problem, and that began to raise everybody's ire. Parents got mad, um, and so they held true, and in most states claimed they got rid of Common Core. Really all they did was change the name of the curriculum. And states, by the way, change curriculum so often that it's any wonder they even know what works. But they change it because they get grant money to try new things. But they're trying stuff so much and so often, like I said, they don't really know what works. And it's almost as if they don't care. They just want the grant money. But let's go back to Common Core for a minute. So you have, that's a good example. You have a math problem, let's say in 2nd grade. Now, I don't know how you learned it, but the standard algorithm is you write the two numbers, then the two numbers below, and then you add down. They were told, most states, the teachers were told they couldn't teach it that way until after 6th grade because they said that kids adding it that way didn't understand the math. But all the parents would try and do that on the homework, and then the kids would get a wrong grade even though they got the answer correct. And so much complaining went down, and that they began to move away from calling it Common Core, and they were ditching many of the aspects of Common Core. But what happened also, which this was predictable, is that state scores, particularly in math, started to dive because the kids didn't understand the math. So instead of doing this, what you would think smart people would do is to say, hey, maybe we should ease up a little bit on the rigor. When I was in doing Scoobs, all we heard everywhere I went across the country is we want more rigor, more rigor, more rigor. Well, you can outrigger the age group, which is kind of what happened. So when state scores started to dive, did they ease up the rigor? No. They changed how the grading was so that the kids could get higher scores, even though they still didn't know the math. So you have these two things that don't make any common sense. We made it harder, they can't do it. Now we're embarrassed because the scores are low. We'll just change how we grade and make the scores higher. But even with that, you have inner city schools like in Chicago and Baltimore where less than 10 to 15% of the population is graduating at grade level in math, reading. That how are they ever going to get out and be successful in life? Just because you're bragging about your graduation rates, you're graduating people who don't know anything. Um, but there's so many things, in some, I'll give in California, for instance, they have gotten rid of the gifted program because they say it makes people who can't make gifted feel bad. But now you have kids who are exceptionally smart sitting in class bored because the curriculum is below their what their brain can do. They can do harder work, but they're not allowed now to accelerate ahead of the rest of the class. I never would have been in gifted program when I was in school, but I wouldn't have wanted anyone else who qualified to not be able to scoot ahead. That's just natural. We wouldn't do that to an athlete. And you also have other states where they're literally not allowed. You're not allowed to get below a 70. The teacher cannot get below a 70 in some states, even if you don't turn in the work. So you cannot fail school, even if you do no work. And so you're graduating people who don't know anything. And instead of working on what the real problems are, which is to get them, there's other ways to get the kids to do work. If you give them an out, look, I was a lazy boy, like a lot of boys and some girls. If I had found out when I was struggling in algebra 2 that I couldn't get below a C for not doing any work, I would have checked out the rest of the semester because I still would have graduated. I would still gotten a passing grade. And that just doesn't make any sense. Um, Behavior is a big issue right now. So most people, if you quiz them, why is right now there's about 100,000 teaching positions open across the country that they can't fill. The problem's getting worse exponentially. It's so bad in New Jersey, you don't even have to pass the praxis anymore, which was the test you took after college to prove that you were qualified to be a teacher. Now you can just be a teacher as long as you got a certain score on the SAT. Um, so you're not qualifying them to be a teacher. And when I said earlier, there's a lot of stuff that makes no common sense. So let's think about that. You're making it easier to be a teacher, but the people who actually went to college to be a teacher, went through student teaching, did the praxis to be a certified teacher, they've left the profession. How long are the people who aren't qualified going to stay in the profession when they see how difficult it is and how little support they get from administration? Then what are you going to do? Are you going to let people out of jail and give them early release if they teach school? I mean, they're solving they're putting a band-aid on the problem. They're not solving the reason that all the teachers are leaving the profession. Most people, if you ask them why teachers leave the profession, it always comes up, it's pay. That's not it. I interviewed over several hundred teachers who were retiring or left the profession. Pay was number three. Pay was number three. It wasn't the top. They were leaving because the students' behavior and and the stress and workload that was number two. And maybe you can say the pay was three because some people will put up with a stressful job if the pay is good. But let's go back to pay for a second. And I told you my wife's a public school teacher. It's a misconception that they don't make very much money. What typically happens is this. So, well, all schools, let me tell you how they get paid. Teachers, because it's a government position, doesn't matter. Nothing else matters but your time spent in the profession. So they get steps. Now, most states, they get like a raise every year for the first, I think, 5 years. I may be getting that wrong, but then it's every 2 years, every 3 years. You keep getting those steps. As long as you're in the profession, you keep making more money. If you get your master's degree, you typically get a big, like $10,000, $15,000 a year raise for getting your increasing your degree. You get your specialist, you get another 10. Your doctorate, you get another 10,000. So a teacher in most states that has been in the profession for $100,000 summers off. It's most of us couldn't do it. I'd be fired in the first week, but the notion that they don't make that much money. The reason you see the averages, it'll sometimes you'll see some of it. Well, the average teacher only makes 40,000 a year. That's because so many teachers. You know that 50% of teachers coming out of school will leave the profession before 5 years. That's sad. Teachers who have experience are your best teachers. They've been in the class long enough to know what the questions are going to be. They know how to teach the subject matter. They can answer the questions more succinctly because they've heard the questions for multiple years from different students. So when half of your workforce hasn't even been in the classroom for more than 5 years, that's a problem. That's only getting worse. The problem that is pushing most teachers out is the lack of support from the administration for behavioral issues and the stress and workload. And no one is doing anything to fix it. They're not doing anything to fix it. I mean, I read an article last year of a woman who said that she left the teaching profession and went to work for Costco, and she loves it more because she's making about the same amount of money with less stress. And I thought, okay, she has a master's degree in education. She should be in a classroom. That's what her original goal was. But because we don't make it a job that anyone wants to hold on to, we're just losing teachers right and left. They estimate by the end of 2026 there'll be 200,000 open teaching positions. That's going to be hard to fill.
Your audio kind of cut out just a little bit earlier, but I kind of wanted to preface this again by wanted to make sure that you kind of got that out there. How much do teachers normally make a year? I wanted to make sure that kind of got in there because the audio
Mhm.
kind of cut out just a little bit there. So I wanted to make
Well,
sure
it
you said
depends on
that.
the state. It really depends on the state. They all have their, like Mississippi pays the least, um, and it also depends on cost of living. Like New York pays more than Georgia, but to live in New York is a different. But in Georgia, a teacher who's been teaching for 15 years, 20 years, and has her master's should be making between 80 and 100,000 a year. You get to 20 years and you've got your master's or you're a specialist, you'll be making over 100,000 in most counties. So it's not that when people look up what does a teacher make on average, the average is low because only half the teachers continue with getting their raises because they leave the profession before they've actually gotten to the top of the pay scale.
All right. I just wanted to make sure that they got in there. So I appreciate you for
Yeah, I
explaining that a little
understand.
more. Um, should parents kind of look into schools before they admit their kids in there to make sure that their kid gets a really um an accurate and a well taught lessons? What should parents look out for when they're admitting their kids into public school?
Well, that's a good question. So a lot of parents just assume that the local public school that their district to is the best. And that may be true. It really depends on your area. But if you can go on YouTube right now, most like inner city, especially in Boston, New York, you'll see parents literally praying, crying, crossing their fingers, hoping that their kid gets into the local charter school. And because there's so much need for so many people wanting to leave the public schools in those areas, the charter schools can't handle them all. So they do it on a lottery. Um, you should really check out the school. A lot of people who have money will typically look at it before they move into the district. Not all, but a lot of people don't have that option. Um, but I would say you definitely want to look at the school. In most states, you can now choice them to another school, whether that's in another public school or a charter school or even a private. Um, But there's two things that parents told me that when I was doing my interviews and research. It was the curriculum. The kids weren't learning anything, or behavior is also an issue. So if you have teachers who have problems with violent behavior, that generally also translates to other students who are having to deal with that violent behavior as well, whether that's bullying or whatever it is. But there are a lot of parents told me, particularly the ones that I interviewed in Boston and Baltimore, that they didn't feel like the administration cared about the safety of their kids, and their kids were getting injured or bullied daily. Um, so you can visit the school. I think you're probably better off to talk to people in the area who have their kids going to those schools, because just like any dog and pony show, if you go to see the local school, they're going to give you the best of it. They're not going to
Mm.
share with you the worst of it. Most states, by the way, I think all states, I hope to all states, you can go on the Secretary of State's office, Department of Ed, rather, and you can see the state scores for every school. Um, and you should understand too, there's one thing that also people need to understand. I always hear that, well, we need more money in education. We don't need more money in education. There is so much money in education. It's ridiculous. That will upset most district people and some teachers, but that's a fact. I have a chart in my book of how spending on education has gone. It's literally a quarter to a third of most state budgets. The problem is how that money is getting used. And in most cases, it's getting trapped at the top. I have a guy I interviewed, he's in the book, but we have a chart in there that he gave me. Teachers' increase in pay over the past 20 years has only gone up by like 12%. Administration pay has gone up 135%. So administrators are paying themselves more. They're getting more money from the government, saying, all right, we can pay ourselves a lot more salary, but they're not passing it down to the teachers in a lot of cases. And there's also a bigger push at the district level for more people working at the district who can micromanage the teachers. Teachers don't need micromanaged in most cases. These are cush jobs for friends. A lot of districts are, the people who are getting hired are friends of friends and people in the district, but it's like any other place, there's politics. But the money that's coming into education is more than enough. If money was the problem with education, it would already be fixed. But yet, every year for the past 35 years, they have increased how much we're spending on education. And you know what? As the money has gone up, the scores have gone down because it has no correlation. And anybody that wants to argue this with me, here's a challenge for them. So you may not know what Title One is. Title One originally it was set up so that schools who had in poorer areas where the state scores were lower, those schools could get extra money to for after school programs, for technology, for whatever they needed to try and help get the students better educated. When Obama came in, uh, it was now tied to free and reduced lunch. So a school that had a certain amount of, I think it was 40% of the population was on free and reduced lunch, got these extra funds to the school called Title One funds. And it's a lot. I mean, just 1 grand. But what happened is two problems. The first one is that they created a welfare system. I literally visited a a school where I pulled in while the parents were dropping off the students. They were BMWs and Mercedes and all this. And I asked the principal, I said, I thought y'all were Title One. He said, yeah, we make sure to get enough people on free and reduced lunch so we can get that extra money. Because they don't vet that. They just, if you fill out the application, you get free and reduced lunch. So the schools promote, they want to be on Title One for the extra money. Now, I'll give you the second example of why money doesn't help. My resource at Scoobs, we sold 90% of the schools we were in were Title One schools because they had the extra money to spend. Schools that didn't get the extra money couldn't afford us sometimes because they were skimping by with paying for the basics. I had a whole county in Georgia that I went to, and this would have been 10 years ago, 8 years ago. They literally converted the library cart that you would put the books on. to an iPad cart. They had an iPad for every student 10 years ago. Whereas when I would go to non-Title I schools, they had one iPad per classroom. And that school was due testing than the district that had all the extra Title I money because the money has nothing to do with it. What has to do more is what the kids go home to at night. You can do all you want to teach a student, but they go home and they don't have any help at home. They don't have anyone holding them accountable for doing their homework. Someone who's looking through their folder to see what their grades are, showing up for conferences. Maybe they don't have enough food, their parent is in jail, or they've seen them get arrested, or they see them on drugs. A teacher cannot overcome that. It just is what it is. Their life at home is overriding their chance at success. And so, if you want to help the schools, we need to help the neighborhoods because you can pour all the money you want into a school in a poor neighborhood. You'll have the nicest looking school. It'll be painted. It can be whatever you want. You can add a science lab, robotics. It won't make a difference in their grades if they're not focused on education.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that I have opinions on about school, but kind of I wanted to kind of wrap things up on one last question. I know a lot of schools think these are the problem, and there's a lot of schools that think that phones need to be locked up. Do you really see like phones being a huge problem, or do you think it's kind of another thing that it's a little bit over the top of how education and how educators are really handling that situation?
So in many states, just this year, including Georgia, they're not allowed to bring them in the classroom. And
Yep.
it is a problem. I'll tell you why. And these are just pretty basic things. The first thing that teachers tell me is that when they were allowed to bring him in the classroom, she might be teaching on the whiteboard. She turn around and all their heads are down on their phones. So they're not paying attention to the teacher. They're paying attention to the phone. And when they hear the phone go off, they can't help but go and look at the phone. And let's face it, if you're trying to learn something that's hard, you need to have your focus on what's being taught. You can't kind of listen haphazardly and truly learn it. The second thing is that there are now apps out there that have AI built in. So I could write a math problem on this piece of paper in front of me, right? And I could take the app and say, solve the problem, and it'll give me the answer. And so kids were cheating. And so that's an issue. Um, the second thing is that the third thing is that, and this is a biggie. When I was young, if you were being bullied or having a tough day at school, you could go home and get away from that. But nowadays, the bullying follows you on the phone. It's on your social media. It's on this and that. What teachers have told me is that they've had, particularly girls who have a meltdown in class out of the blue, and then you find out when they get sent to the counselor's office that somebody was harassing them while they were in school who was in another classroom in the same school. And so the phones are just allowing distraction to what your goal is. You're there to learn. You're not there for anything else. You can be on the phone. And quite frankly, you don't need to be on your phone all day long. Even as an adult, I've tried to pare back on that. But I think that the phones kind of make us dumber in some respects. Like I used to be great with directions in my head. Now I probably I couldn't find the basic stuff because I don't even think about it. I just put it into my phone and it tells me where to go. But that would be when it comes to cell phones in school, that would be the two or three main issues. It's a distraction. They're not paying attention. There's bullying going on, and you can use the phone to cheat.
Yeah, Alabama kind of put it into effect this year. Our governor had just at the beginning of this school year had passed the Focus Act, which was a way for students to have not have their phone in class. Phones were banned from the classrooms. They had to be kept in their lockers or all day or state or had to be kept at home. Um, Before then, it wasn't that big of an issue from my school point because they kind of
Hmm.
my school had ways of keeping phones kind of out of reach for kids. They would have the phone pockets. We sometimes had to put our phone up on the whiteboard, and they would
Okay.
check too. So when I heard that the Focus Act was getting passed, I was a little like, I don't know why they're having to really enforce that. And it's become like a huge debate kind of here in our state. I don't know how other states are about well, it's a Gen Z thing, it's a boomer thing, and it's like, well, when I was in school, we didn't have phones, and I said, and it's kind of just been this huge fight with kids and parents as well as just regular adults about
Hmm.
if it's right. I know a lot of young parents think that are have kids now in schools that have a way, it's kind of their only way of knowing if their kid's safe. If it's kind of their
Yeah,
way to know that, oh, my kid could text me if something happened at school and if I need to come pick them up. And then, but then you
yeah,
have other parents that are like, well, they don't need to be on their phones all day. They need to be sitting in class
yeah.
all day and focusing. So it's kind of been a huge controversy thing, and it has been a huge controversial thing that the governor has signed into effect because there's so many different opinions from
Right. Well,
divisions
I
about.
commend your teacher for having people put them up on the board, but I don't think that every teacher was doing that. In Georgia, I believe they can have them in their locker,
Mhm.
so they can go and use them if they in between class. It's just you can't have it in the classroom with you.
Yeah, they've kind
I
of
will tell
really
you
have.
one other thing that I forgot to mention. So, so I'll give you a story. I interviewed someone who, and I wasn't interviewing for this story, but it just came up. Her daughter, somebody gave her something, said she would feel good. She takes it in school. She collapses on the floor into a seizure and is, having a seizure and spitting up. Well, instead of anyone helping her, there's just like 10 kids around videotape, recording it. And before she's even in the ambulance, it's on social media. And now it's being passed around. It's fights. This is what happened with fights. There's stuff that goes on that doesn't need to be on social media. And she ended up taking her daughter out of the school because she was so embarrassed and driving her to another school like 30 minutes away so that she didn't have to see those kids, those students anymore.
Right.
And so I think it's just better that the phones remain. Uh, they don't have to be gone, but I think they just need to be the amount of their involvement in the class needs to be mitigated.
Yeah, they're like completely banned in class, and I don't think kids are even at our schools are even allowed on their phones at all during the day. It's like
Mhm.
they can't even look at it at their locker. It has to just be put up and everything.
Right.
And I know a lot of students, the thing that kind of got me was if they were like at lunch, they couldn't be on it. If they were at break time, they couldn't be on it. And I thought, now I don't know why y'all are going that far. I understand the
Hmm.
focus at in classrooms and paying attention. But what out of a whole hour and a half, because our high school had only four classes during the day, and it was an hour and a half. I thought, what's it going to hurt for a student to be on their phone 15 minutes at lunch compared to having to sit in a class for an hour and a half? Like I didn't,
Yeah.
and that's
Well,
kind
that
of the
may be
whole
the
controversial thing.
sometimes the pendulum swings hard the other way when one of the things I've noticed through my lifetime is that politicians don't know the definition of moderate. Like it's got to be all or nothing. We have this problem over here, so we swing hard to this side. We could just come back a little bit to the middle, take a step back, and in business, that's how you would do it. You would come back to the middle a little bit, and then if that wasn't enough, you could come back farther. You should never just make a 380-degree turn or a 180-degree turn and go in a different direction. But that's just not how politics, unfortunately, work. And a lot of politicians want to be able to campaign on the win. So, you know, look what I did. You want to vote for me, right? I got the phones out of the class. And
Right.
here's the thing. I think it's fine if they want to do that, I guess, but they should at least see there should be the next 2 or 3 years, you should be able to see if there's any change in grades, in scores, in behavioral issues, to see if it actually mitigated anything. It's
Right.
possible that we're wrong. Maybe it has no effect. Mississippi has been last place in education across this country for probably 20 years. They're now number three. A lot of the things that I advocate in my book for changes, they have not because of me, I don't think, but they have made a lot of changes to how they teach the curriculum and what they're willing to put up with. And they have raised their scores. Other states should be looking at what they're doing and trying to take some pieces of that because it has been very successful. But I don't know if they banned phones in Mississippi. I don't think didn't read that in the article. They did.
And I don't really know if it's just phones or that means all kinds of electronics used, because I know a lot of people tend to now take notes on laptops, if they take notes on iPads, because there's a lot of good apps that are on iPads that are good for note
Mhm.
taking. I'm not, I've not really heard if those got banned as well. I would assume that they probably did, since it was more of kind of a technology thing. But the thing with iPads and laptops is that the only way to really use it's on the internet. And what
Yeah.
school system can do, and like if their phone's not in the classroom to set up as like a hotspot, then they can't really get on the internet and without going
Well,
through.
iPads you can set up for cell. I have mine connected to cellular. So, but you're right. Um, yeah, well, and I love reading on my iPad because I can highlight things, I can make notes in the books I'm
Mhm.
reading.
Yeah.
Um, so the thing about technology, and we're going to find out this the hard way with AI, but it has lots of positives, but we have just as many negatives. And I think sometimes we have to kind of look at it objectively and say these are the things that we should be worried about, and these are the things that are going well. The problem with that is that no one can agree on anything anymore. So getting to a
Yep.
consensus is very difficult.
Yeah, when it comes to this topic about phones and this act, and even anything with education, that's a huge complaint that kind of comes with it because people have such different opinions about how things should all be handled and everything. I've just
Hmm.
known that I graduated from college like last year, but I graduated from high school 4 5 years ago. I'm so happy I'm not in public school anymore because of just how it is. And
Hmm.
it was rough when I went through it, but I'm just I'm just happy and glad that I'm not in the school and in that school system now because I don't think I would have lasted at all with this. But I think it is important to kind of bring this sort of awareness to people to let them know about what is actually happening because I think a lot of educators too keep a lot of this information withheld from parents because they don't want any of this stuff coming out into the
That is
public
true.
because it really will really put a damper on their image. It'll affect their professionalism. It'll really put like a huge controversy and a huge backlash on them if
Hmm.
said that. So I think bringing up the fact, and I do appreciate you being really honest about the education system and really showing the signs of it because I think a lot of parents listening to that will be so appreciative for you saying that. So I do appreciate you for opening up about it. Um, I'm kind of getting a little wrapped up on time, but I just wanted to kind of wrap things up
Okay.
on. I appreciate you so much for coming on here and even sharing about small businesses and education because those are two major importantly things that I think a lot of people don't know about. If people want to like get in contact with you if they have questions about education or about small businesses and want to know some more
Hmm.
information about this, where all can people get in contact with you? And most importantly, where can people find you to get connected?
The easiest way to find me, because it has all of my social media, is BryanThomasWetzel.com. So it's BryanThomasWetzel.com. And I've got everything in there. You can find my books. You can connect to me on social media it's the best way all in one place.
All righty. Well, for I want to thank Brian so much for coming on the podcast today and really showcase this. I honestly would love to have like a part two about it because I feel like there's so many questions about
Sure.
education. I was like, I'd like to like
Yeah.
ask and know. But I will put his website link down there below. His website, of course, as he mentioned, has all of his links to his books, his articles, as well as some social media accounts. And I'll also put all of his socials in the description box below so that if you would like to get connected with him, ask if you have questions for him or just would like to follow him and see what he has in store and has for the future. It's all down there for you guys to check out. Feel free to follow the podcast on social media, Instagram and TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcast. And as always, listen to Lethal Venom wherever you get your podcast from. I'm on all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It is everywhere, so feel free to subscribe so that you'll get notified when new episodes start coming out. Thank you all for tuning in to today's episode. Hope y'all all enjoyed it. Y'all all have a great rest of your day. Be safe, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.